I want to talk a little bit about that gospel reading. And this week's gospel reading about the talents. It follows directly on last week's reading about the wise and foolish bridesmaids. And I believe that both of these parables uh, are of the same sort of spirit. And can I just say from the outset, this parable, it has been badly used throughout our history. This parable, in my view, not just my view, is not any kind of justification, a scriptural or biblical justification for why the rich should not pay taxes or any of that sort of thing. That's not what is going on in this parable. Similar to last week's parable, where we talked about the assumptions that got made about the bridegroom, similarly, this week's parable, that third slave who was entrusted with the one talent. And he says, well, I know that you reap where you do not sow, and you're a harsh man. And there is no indication into the parable up until that point that that is actually the case. In fact, any of the evidence in the parable would seem to indicate quite the opposite, that in fact the master is gracious and generous and kind and giving. That's certainly the way he was with the other two slaves. But this third slave completely misses that. And I believe this parable is saying to us, similar to the parable about the bridesmaids, it's reminding us of how much of our experience in life, our experience of other people, our experience of God, our religious faith, is rooted in the assumptions and beliefs and preconceived notions and all of that we have about God, about other people. If we believe that this is a dog eat dog world and might makes right and he with the most toys at the end wins, if that's what we believe about the world, then that's exactly the way that we are going to experience the world. It is exactly the way that we are going to experience other people. If, however, we believe that in every other person created by God, there is somehow the presence of the divine, that every other person we meet is also a child of God. Sometimes that can be buried, deeply buried, under brokenness and hurt and anger and all of those experiences we collect up as we live this life. But if we believe God is gracious and kind and generous and giving and loving and compassionate, then that changes how we treat other people. It changes what we think about our religious faith. It changes how we live our lives. And I don't know how anyone can read the Gospels of Jesus, the stories of Jesus, and not believe and not see how good and kind and generous and gracious and loving and compassionate and merciful God is, in fact. Very soon we'll be coming into the Christmas season. And how often do we hear people say about the Christmas season and the Christmas spirit and, oh, I wish this feeling could last all year, and, that magic that's in the air in the Christmas season. And I've often reminded people that, well, whether or not you experience that through the rest of the year, it's kind of up to you, isn't it? Isn't it kind of up to each one of us? What we experience of other people depends entirely on what some of our core assumptions and beliefs are about the world. And for Christians, we surely believe that other people are, at their heart, good, that other people want to love and be loved, that there is kindness in every other person. And when we believe that, there's an old saying, medieval era, I think it was St. John of the Cross, who, the Spanish mystic, who one time said, where there is no love, pour love in, and you will draw love out. That's what we Christians believe about other people. The world is a good place. Our God is a kind and gracious and loving God. How can we read the Gospels and not see that? Other thing I've been thinking about this week with this particular parable. At St. Thomas's, we have sponsored a refugee family. We've sponsored several families over the decades. And this particular family is a Kurdish family. And if you think about what all the Kurds have been through, I think for people who have followed the news and the last few years, the Kurdish people were so instrumental, absolutely essential in defeating ISIS. And in my opinion, again, I don't think it's just my opinion, I think we in the West kind of stabbed them in the back when we pulled all of our troops out and we left them up to the likes of Erdogan and Assad in Syria, and there's been wholesale slaughter. And this particular family, they even escaped. They got to Lebanon. They survived the explosion in Beirut. And so we've moved them into Belleville. They are spectacularly friendly, nice, gentle family, industrious. Let me just tell you about one of the members of that family. They have a teenage son. And while they were in Lebanon, I should mention, by the way, were not allowed to go to school. They were not allowed to go out of their apartment. And so they've been shut up in this apartment for 3 years. The fear is that if they went out, they could be picked up by the security forces. Kurds are not allowed to go to school. It's illegal to teach Kurds in Lebanon. And countries do this sort of thing as a way of, frankly, getting people out of a country. They can't hold a job. They can't go to school. All this stuff. It's just terrible. So the teenage boy, Arabic is his first tongue, and Kurdish. And on top of that, he is fluent in English and fluent in Japanese without a day in school. And the way he has learned those languages is through watching cartoons online and watching Western movies. Now, I have a few languages under my belt. I'm not saying that I'm fluent in a number of languages, but I think to myself, holy cow, if I tried to learn a language from watching cartoons, if I tried to learn Japanese from watching cartoons, I can't even hear the sounds. And I think this kid, he's the only one I've gotten to know him, and the others aren't as conversant in English. Absolutely brilliant. I think that kid has got to have a brilliant, brilliant mind. How on earth do you do that? Learn Japanese by watching cartoons and English from watching movies? I don't know how you do that sort of thing. And so at any rate, with this reading about the talents and burying talent in the ground, and I guess the whole situation with the refugee family has gotten me to thinking about how we, and I mean this in a metaphorical way, but how we bury people and bury talents in people. And you think about, say this family had to stay over there and no opportunities and no job and no education and all of this stuff. Like, think of the talent, the gift to the world, the gift to our community, the gift to our country, the gift to the world that the members of this family are. And how many people do we just write off? How many people become casualties of our world's way of doing things, and the violence in our world, and the wars that we wage against one another? And, may I say, the assumptions that we make about other people. So that's what this parable is suggesting to me this week, and it's what these texts are speaking to me this week. As I've just been doing some reflecting on how many people, talent, gifts, glorious children of God, get treated like they are just kind of thrown onto the rubbish heap of our world and our society. We mustn't ever make assumptions about other people, assumptions about God. When we can root our beliefs about God and root our beliefs about other people in our Christian faith, it changes absolutely everything. It changes how we treat people, how we approach people, how we help people. It changes our compassion for other people. It changes absolutely everything. That's what these texts speak to me. Amen.